miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, everywhere's a home.
You know, everybody's still buzzing over this weekend's mega fight. A fight that actually delivered. A fight that actually lived up to the hype. Everybody's still buzzing over this weekend's fight between Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. The rematch. Everybody's still buzzing, but not in a good way.
We go again.
Very similar to what took place at the end of the first fight. Very similar to that.
People are mad.
A large amount of people, and I mean large. You know, there is a high abundance of people that seem to have a discrepancy with the scoring in the rematch. Not just the first fight, but the scoring in the rematch. You know, the people over there at Press Row are one example. 15 had it at a draw, 2 had it for Canelo, and a whopping 34 people scored it for Golovkin. And that's just the people at Press Row. You take a look around at the vast majority of the people in
boxing
the
groups,
boxing media, the pundits, and even some of the professionals. And the majority of what you're seeing is that most people either scored it a draw or they scored it for Golovkin. Coincidentally, I scored it for Golovkin. Those of you that follow this channel may or may not be aware that in my post-fight video, I said I scored it 7-5 for Triple G. There were a couple of swing rounds, but when I looked at my scorecard at the end of the fight, I had it 7 rounds to 5, Gennady Golovkin. And in that video, I discussed some of the sentiments that I'm going to express in this video, that, you know, it's 7-5, the fight's very close. Even some of the rounds that Golovkin won, they were still very close and competitive rounds. There could be a margin of error, etc., etc.
Close fight.
But as the fight itself and the effects of the fight reverberate throughout the boxing community, not just the fans, the people on the ground, but the pundits and the professionals themselves, as the effects of that fight reverberate throughout the boxing community, you see a pattern. You see that, well, the vast majority of people that saw this fight, they either think it was a draw or they had Golovkin up by 1 round. Some had him up by more than that. Some guys had it as much as 8-4 in favor of Gennady Golovkin. Myself, I reiterate, I had it 7-5, 7 rounds to 5, or a draw. But unlike most people that feel that the judges got it wrong, unlike most people that scored it the same way I did, I'm not flying off the handle.
It's still a robbery! It's a robbery!
You know what that is? That's doing a robbery without leaving fingerprints. That's all it is. You don't have to rob somebody by 100 points.
Then that means it was an effective robbery.
Yeah, it was an effective robbery.
It's still a robbery! It's a robbery!
I don't care if it's by 2 points, if it's by 1 point. It doesn't have to be by 100 points. They did it with gloves on, okay? They did it in a sly way.
I'm not doing my best impression of Teddy Atlas post-fight when I don't agree with the judges.
Why not?
Why, you ask? Well, did you guys actually sit back and take stock of how much Gennady Golovkin sacrificed to get another shot at Canelo Alvarez? Did you guys sit back and take stock of how much he given up on other opportunities, other things for a Canelo Alvarez rematch? Did you guys ever sit down and think about that?
Doesn't look like.
Did you guys sit down and think about how Gennady Golovkin could have gotten the 4th and final belt in the middleweight division that would have made him the undisputed champion of that weight class?
Against Saunders.
Do you guys realize that he passed on an opportunity to do this for a Canelo Alvarez rematch?
Did you think about it?
Did you guys consider that he sacrificed his IBF title? He held 3 of the 4 major titles, and he sacrificed one of them, fighting with Vanez.
They told him not to.
A lighter touch, a keep busy fight, what could be interpreted as a tune-up fight for what would eventually be a Canelo Alvarez rematch in September. Did you guys take stock of that? Did you guys take stock of
the performance-enhancing drug scandal?
How Gennady Golovkin was actually willing to go into a rematch situation in spite of Canelo Alvarez testing positive for a performance-enhancing drug? Did you guys take stock of that?
Think about it.
Did you take stock of the fact that the sanctioning bodies, the WBC, the WBA, that they were rushing to Canelo Alvarez's defense? They were calling him innocent before their investigation had even concluded. And in spite of this obvious
favoritism,
what is obvious, partial and biased behavior, that Golovkin still decided to go ahead with the rematch?
Anyway.
Did you think about that? And did you think about the scoring in the first fight? A fight where Gennady Golovkin outlanded Canelo Alvarez 10 rounds to 2. That's saying that in 10 out of 12 rounds, Gennady Golovkin landed more punches than Canelo. 218 punches landed to 169 punches landed. 218 for Golovkin, 169 for Canelo. A difference of 49, a whopping 49 punches landed. And the judges saw fit to call this fight a draw. A fight where Golovkin outlands Canelo 10 rounds to 2. I mean, you can't even make the argument about power punching, you know, that, oh, well, maybe Canelo won it on the back of power punches. He only landed 4 more power punches than Golovkin did. 4 more. You're telling me that 4 more power punches is better than landing 49 more times in terms of jabs?
Bullshit.
No, I mean, it's pretty clear that the first fight was
Some bullshit.
a travesty. The first fight was a robbery. And in spite of the scoring in this first fight where you got robbed, you still sacrificed quite a bit to walk into a rematch situation with this same guy.
So whose fault is that?
I mean, you kind of set yourself up for that one, didn't you? You know, the old proverb, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Going to a rematch situation with this guy, you sacrifice quite a bit to do so. Now, there was a financial incentive. Essentially, this was the biggest money fight Gennady Golovkin could have participated in.
A lot of money.
So, you know, in that way, you can understand why he did it, but okay, you paid the price. You paid the price for getting in the ring with this guy for a second time, knowing it's near impossible to beat him on the cards, even when you outland him 10 rounds to 2, even when you land 49 more punches than he does. It's near impossible to beat this guy on the cards. And in this fight, unlike the first fight, it's a lot closer. In this fight, he's coming forward. He's not moving backwards. In this fight, this guy's actually throwing bombs of his own. He's coming forward. He's throwing bombs of his own. The majority of the fight is being fought at the center of the ring. You guys are trading back and forth. It's a very, very even kind of fight. And you willfully
Walked into it.
chose to be here. And now that you're here, you're in a very close fight. You didn't take it out of the judge's hands the way you were supposed to, which is probably the only way you can beat Canelo Alvarez, is to take it out of the judge's hands. Do what Juan Manuel Marquez did to Manny Pacquiao in their rematch. One of the many. Do what he did in that situation. When Juan Manuel Marquez felt that he'd gotten a raw deal on the cards, he came back in the next fight and he didn't let them give him a raw deal. He took it out of their hands. And that's what Gennady Golovkin essentially had to do here.
Y'all know that.
So if you're wondering why, even though I scored at 7-5 for Golovkin to a draw, I scored at 7-5 to a draw. But if you're wondering if that's the case, well, why aren't you screaming robbery? It's because I find it hard to muster the energy and the vigor to be so upset
When he chose to be here again.
when Golovkin has already been in this situation before and he chose to be here yet again, in spite of everything that happened in between the first fight and now. It's hard to conjure the energy to call what is such a close fight a robbery. The fight itself is close, devoid of all the stuff from the first fight. This fight, the one we just saw, it was a very close fight, very evenly fought fight. You know, Golovkin landed a multitude of jabs, and Canelo Alvarez landed a multitude of power shots. This is a different fight than the first fight, so I find it hard to scream robbery in what's already a close fight, but more importantly, I find it hard to sympathize with this whole sentiment of robbery when Golovkin chose to be here in spite of everything that's happened leading up to this fight. If you're gonna put yourself in a position where you can't trust the judges to do the right thing, and you can't trust their eyes, you can't trust what they see. I mean, I heard one of the guys talking to Teddy, talking to Stephen A. Smith, and he said, well, there wasn't any Adelaide Bird in this fight. No, but there wasn't an Adelaide Bird in the Floyd Mayweather-Canelo Alvarez fight. In that fight, no, it wasn't Adelaide Bird. In that fight, it was C.J. Ross. I mean, what I'm getting at here is, we already knew you're not beating Canelo on the cards. If it goes to the cards, then you fail. You fail. And I understand that it's not fair. I get it. I understand that you guys are saying that it's not fair. But for Gennady Golovkin, who has already experienced this once, and he goes above and beyond to get a rematch so that he can put himself in that position, again, I find it hard to conjure the sympathy. The fight itself was close. I mean, I had it pretty close. 7-5 to a draw? That's pretty close, especially if there's a margin of error, and even worse, if it's Canelo Alvarez that is in the ring. You know, it's a close fight. Canelo Alvarez, he did a really good job. And I don't, don't misunderstand this. I still have no respect for Canelo Alvarez. This is a guy that has far too many advantages, far too many resources tilting the scales in his favor. Understand that I have almost no respect for Canelo Alvarez at this point. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to get in the ring with a guy like this, you have got to seal the deal. And we all know what the deal was. You guys wanted Canelo to stop running because you figured that that's what he was doing in the first fight. He was doing everything he had to do to stay away from Gennady Golovkin. Most of us agree that, yeah, like he's circling away quite a bit. But you look at the punch stats for that fight and this fight, and you watch the actual fight. You see Canelo Alvarez, center ring, coming forward, stalking Golovkin, Golovkin boxing around him. Canelo pressured the pressure fighter. The pressure fighter had to lean towards the boxing. And he did some great boxing, they both did. But in a situation like this where the aesthetic of the fight is completely different in the first, so you can't make those excuses. You can't.
Feelings on the judge's decision?
First of all, I think that we need to congratulate Canelo and his team. He fought a great fight, the kind of fight that I wanted to see, just so that the fans get what they pay for. You have to, I think that we knew that we had fair judges, and I think you have to take your lumps when they see it go the other way. It'd be foolish for me to start criticizing when I don't win. It's a great fight for the fans. I think the fans won. We didn't get it this time, but hopefully they do it again.
Now, Gennady Golovkin was walking backwards most of the fight. Canelo took the fight to him, to the surprise of many. Is that what you expected?
That's exactly what I expected. I thought that he was mad enough that he was going to show everybody and show his fans that he could do that. And I'm very happy for him. I thought that he fought a great fight, like I said, and the judges saw him winning, then he won.
It's very hard for me to be upset about it. It's hard for me to sit here and cry and complain that it's a robbery the way that you guys are in the comments under one of my last videos. It's hard for me to sit there and bust the fucking artery like Teddy Atlas when I figured, look, if Golovkin's gonna win this thing, it's gonna have to be by way of knockout or technical knockout. If this goes to the cards, it could be a fight where Golovkin won decisively, and the most they'll give him is a draw. So what I'm trying to help you guys understand in this video is, it's not that I'm advocating corruption. It's not that I'm condoning it. It's that it is to be expected. All of you expected it. So it's hard to get all upset and all wound up when Golovkin chose to do it. He chose to do the dance with Canelo again, except this time, Canelo Alvarez did far better in the fight than he did in the first fight. So if you're wondering, why isn't Julius screaming robbery if he scored at 7-5? Well, it's because the fight was close and you should have known better. You should have never let it get this far.
Yeah, obviously we wanted him to do a lot of different things, and I'm sure Chepo and Eddie wanted Canelo to do a lot of different things, but when they're in the ring, they're going to do the things that they see available to them. Canelo fought the fight that he needed to fight today to win. The judges saw him win. That's what's important. I think we have to give credit to Canelo instead of trying to say what we didn't do. He fought a great fight.
Christ's sake, you guys are making a bigger stink about this whole thing than the man's own trainer. You know, even Abel Sanchez is accepting of the judge's decision. Far more accepting than the guys that are piling up in the comments under my videos crying because I'm not as upset as they are. I understand what you guys are saying. I'm fully aware that Canelo walks into fights with far too many advantages that affect just how competitive the fight is. That he walks into fights with advantages that ultimately might just affect the outcome. Advantages that are not limited to the action that's going on in the ring, even though ideally that would be the only determining factor in the fight. But you know, it is what it is. Canelo's got advantages.
Golovkin knew that.
And when you're fighting a guy who has these kinds of advantages, it behooves you to not leave it in the judge's hands. And unfortunately, Golovkin did. Not once, but twice. Now, speaking of advantages, speaking of things that are working in Canelo Alvarez's favor, a lot of you might not be aware of this, but apparently, somehow, behind the scenes, behind the bigger headlines that have been going on leading up to this fight,
Golovkin-Canelo rematch.
The fight between Spike O'Sullivan and David Lemeiux, turns out that the winner of that fight, the winner being David Lemeiux, who is coincidentally co-promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, wink wink, him being the winner of that fight, in doing so, he has effectively become, get this, Canelo Alvarez's WBA mandatory. I didn't even realize that was a WBA eliminator, but apparently I don't know when they made this decision. I didn't see any headlines leading up to that fight saying that the winner would be the mandatory challenger for Canelo, since he won. I didn't even fucking know that. Now, I'm not going to say that they weren't out there. The most I can say is if they were, I didn't see them. And I was keeping up, I was following the news surrounding that fight. But I didn't know that the winner of the fight was going to be a WBA mandatory. So, Canelo Alvarez now has the option of fighting David Lemieux, who is a far more beatable opponent than his WBC mandatory, Jermall Charlo, a guy who's been sitting in line for a title shot longer than David Lemieux. I mean, if that fight between David and Spike determined who the mandatory challenger was going to be, if that fight determined that, then that would have to mean that Jermall's been the Mando longer than David. So rightfully, it should be Jermall that Canelo fights next. But once again, I'm cynical. I've been a boxing fan for a very long time. And because of that, I'm cynical. I have to be.
You can't be naive.
That in mind, you guys think that the WBC is going to put the squeeze on Canelo to fight Jermall? You guys think that? Because I don't. I think they'll let Canelo have his pick of the litter the way that they didn't back in 2016. I don't think they're going to put the pressure on Canelo to fight Jermall, the same kind of pressure that they put on him way back when to fight Golovkin, which ultimately led to Canelo taking their title and throwing it in the air. I don't think they're going to do that. They don't want that. Not that Canelo's, not now that his stock is high with his sycophants and his fanatics. Of course not. I don't think they're going to put pressure, the WBC, I don't think they're going to put pressure on Canelo to fight Jermall Charlo. That's could be a hard fight. It could be.
Perhaps.
I think that if we do see Canelo again in the next few months, which is, it could be in December, according to Canelo, I think if and when we see him again, it might likely be against David Lemieux. And you know what? Given both of their styles, I think it'll be a very fun fight to watch. It will. But at the end of the day, if you ask me a question, do I think the WBC is going to put their foot down? Fuck no, I don't. Why? Because Canelo has advantages. Like I was saying earlier, he's got advantages. He has the luxury of options because he's a marquee fighter. And these guys want a marquee fighter holding their title. Bigger fights, bigger sanctioning fees, everybody makes more money. We all know how it works. So that in mind, rightfully, it should be Jermall that gets the shot next. I'm just saying, don't hold your breath with your idealism, because it might not work out that way.